Time Again, exposing the truth. Welcome to Coffee Time Again, exposing the truth. Dale at the microphone, the show that demonstrates how history repeats itself. He digs into the past, shows what happens, and how it is happening now. Follow the path of history to where it goes, then relate it to today to reveal the connections. The culture that forgets its history has no future. A history buff and loves to talk about it, going back as far as ancient Greeks and Egyptians and beyond. So grab your coffee, your chair, and listen to the show. Hope you enjoy.
Well, hello, world and America, of course. Welcome to the podcast Coffee Time Again. I am Dale, your host. This is where we expose the truth. Today, we're exposing the truth with Cameron Cowan, and he's got some very interesting things that he's talking about. I'm not going to spoil his show by telling you what it is. I'm going to let him figure it out for you. Anyway, welcome. My name is Dale, as I said, and let's get going. Cameron, introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Cameron Cowan. I'm the
Can you turn your volume up a little on your mic?
No, it's already peaking actually. Got it here. Yeah, no, I'm already quite high.
Oh, there we are. That's perfect.
Um,
Sorry about the interruption, folks.
yeah, I don't even know where I was now.
Start over. That's where we was.
Yes. I'm so sorry. What were we?
All right.
I very lost. I'm so sorry. Very lost. Oh, we were introducing ourselves. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, all right.
Yes. So my name is Cameron Cowan. I'm creative director of the Cameron Journal. I'm also the director of publications and anthologies at Soup Media. And I guess we're going to talk a little bit about everything today,
Yep.
from current events to maybe books and writing, and we'll just see where it goes.
That's the way I usually like to see him go. I don't try to script him in any way. I like him open and free to talk about what we need to talk about. But you mentioned
Yeah.
books. Do you have one ready? Or are you writing one?
Well, I have out some that have been out for some time, and I have a new one coming. So my first novel, Cast Iron, and my short story collection, An Unfinished Coloring Book. Unfortunately, I decided to release my books in probably the worst time to release books ever. And I released my novel in January of 2020, and I released my short story collection in March of 2020.
Yeah.
So, as far as dates to launch books, I picked the worst year to launch books in, kind of living memory, except for maybe 2001 around September.
Yeah.
Um, so those are out. Those are out now. My first book, What the Hell is Going On, is no longer in print, but there is a new collection of all the essays inside of it at CameronJournal.com. And
Okay.
then my new book that's in production as we speak is called America's Lost Generation.
Ooh.
And it is talking about millennials, particularly people my age, born between 86 and 91, who came of age during the financial crisis, looking at us through the lens of our Japanese cousins and what happened in Japan after the 1991 real estate crash and the following Asian financial crisis in 1997. So I look at kind of that period and what happened to those people, and I look at us, and surprise, surprise, it's not good, like
No.
sort of thing.
Well,
So, and my new book features a lot of data, a lot of quotes, a lot of research, but most importantly, it features real interviews from real people from all walks. I have a plumber who's never had a problem. I have people whose careers never got off the ground. I have middle class people who are like, we're one health problem away from losing our house, and
mm,
every shade in between to show the modern precarity of what it's like to be, under 45, and how difficult the economy is for, millennials and younger.
mm. I can see what you're talking about. When you get this book published, can you contact me and we'll get you back on?
Yeah, it will probably be out in late summer. We're in layout right now, cover's already done, all this type of
Okay.
thing. So yeah, we'll be in layout this summer, but it's been a long time coming. It actually kind of took so long. When I started writing it, I then went to grad school to get my MFA, and
Mhm.
that delayed it by 2 years. So I ended up putting in a lot of stuff about Gen Z into
Yeah.
it kind of as time went on because it took me so long to write. Um, but yeah, it's an interesting it's a very interesting dynamic. And also we get a little bit international. We get into kind of how it's affected Europeans and Canadians and all this type of thing. We
Okay.
get into real estate, dating, just all these different topics of just like why, it sucks to be a young person right now. So
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, it ain't no bullet jelly to be an old man either.
no, it definitely, I mean, that's a different set of problems that include,
Yeah, it is.
Medicare issues and Social Security issues and a whole bunch of other things. But when we're looking at economic opportunity, young people definitely do not have the same opportunities as their parents did. And it's
No.
really showing in economic data these days. When you look at share of national wealth, um, of millennials only have 4% of the national wealth, and 2% of that is Mark Zuckerberg.
Hmm.
Just Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
So even, and then one of the things I found in the course of the research is I basically found there were three groups. There was group A of millennials who were kind of fine with everything. There was group B of those who struggled and were kind of surviving. And I also found group C of people that really weren't surviving at all. And that gets into NEETs, which is an acronym for not employed, educated, or training, people that, stuck living with their parents for a long time, whose lives just never get off the ground. And that also affects dating. The dating pool is smaller. Millennials delayed having children. We're actually finally starting to have children in
Hmm.
volume. And the sad thing is that the story didn't have to be this way. Millennials are America's largest, the boomers had a lot of kids, largest, most educated generation in American history. If we'd played our cards differently, millennials could have done immeasurable progress and success for this country. Unfortunately, because of a lot of structural changes made starting with Ronald Reagan and in the decades afterwards, that opportunity was just not available. And
Yeah.
so when you have people that took too long to get careers off the ground, delayed having children, which means they'll have fewer children, are unable to buy a house or delayed buying a house and all this sort of thing, you end up with, this situation where the Gen Z kids don't like millennials. The boomers think we're lazy. Gen Z thinks we're cringe. No one likes us. But the reality is, especially now that we're getting into middle age, we are the people who are in middle getting into upper management now. We are the people who are buying houses, buying cars, having children. We're on the PTA, we're doing all the stuff. We're the ones keeping society going, despite the fact that our parents think we're just a bunch of lazy layabouts and our Gen Z cousins think we're just ew, gross, disgusting sort of thing. And so it's been an interesting, journey to watch all the ways in which things just didn't work out for people and to look at all the structural reasons why that was the case and to just know it didn't have to be this way.
No, it
We
did.
could have made different decisions. And I'll admit, I wrote this book out of kind of my own selfishness of how my own career had never gotten off the ground.
Yeah.
My own situation was very difficult, and I didn't realize how common it was until I started engaging in online communities. And I had studied capitalism in my first book. And I'd written two essays about that and all this type of thing. And kind of as an outgrowth of that, I wanted to focus on, you know, very selfishly, it's like, I'm young, I'm smart, I'm educated. Why can't I get a job? And
Hmm.
that was why I got involved in Occupy. So a lot of people got involved in Occupy. That was, the start of my leaving the Republican Party, becoming more liberal. And this book is kind of really the culmination of a lot of the stuff that I'd read and researched and talked about as the years have gone by. And I have to say, the other book that is similar to mine, although it's more data driven, less narrative driven. I'm a storyteller, so I write narratively. Um, it's a quite sad tale. Like it's to some degree it's kind of already over for us. Like it will never get any better for us. When you graduate into the deepest recession since the Great Depression, you are basically permanently locked into an economic underclass. That's what happened in Japan. It's such a problem in Japan. The government is trying to solve a pension crisis because all these people have not contributed to pensions and all this sort of thing. Um, and so, they're trying you end up with this kind of economic drag all the way through that just never goes away. And it was a quite sad thing as well. And the other sad reality is, and we're kind of already seeing the starting shades of it when it comes to the really tough things like reducing defense spending, entitlement reform, all this type of thing. It's very obvious that our parents are not willing to do any of that stuff. We're going to have to do it. And I think what's even kind of more sad is we're going to have to screw ourselves out of entitlements that we've been paying into in order to save them. Which is a quite sad thing all on its own. This is why I say it's not going to get any better, like on the economic side. It's going to get measurably worse. And
Yeah,
so,
how are you going to screw
yeah.
yourself out of entitlements to make them better?
Well, I mean, here's the reality. When you start talking about Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, the reality is you're going to have a reduction in benefits in the coming decades. That's just going to happen. I think you can solve healthcare by combining like the VA system, Medicare, Medicaid, which is just a block grant program to the states. If you combine all those together into a sort of, gov health, patriot healthcare, as I like to call it, sort of thing. Universal healthcare would solve the healthcare side of the entitlement sort of thing. Social Security you can't really solve because people live too long. When Social Security was created, 65 people, the average Social Security check went out for a year and a half. People died faster. We now regularly live into our 70s and 80s, which means people are spending 20 years not working. So
Mhm.
the reality is if we're going to have Social Security as a portion of people's retirement or as a floor so seniors don't go back to living in slums eating dog food, which is how it used to be before Social Security, the reality is we're going to have to cut back on benefits. The reality is that that's what's going to happen. Even if you raise the income cap, because if you can make more than $125,000, you don't pay Social Security tax anymore. Even if you raise that cap, you're still going to have a problem of sending out $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, accounting for inflation 30 years from now,
Yeah.
to people every month of their lives for the next 20 years. That's not sustainable. That's not really what the program was created for. That's also one of the reasons the program is running out of money. Congress also looted the Social Security in the 90s to balance the budget when there was a huge surplus, which has also caused the problem. But the reality is all of these problems they're all starting to come home to roost. And we've kicked the can down the road for decades. Well, there's no more road. We're running out of road to kick the can down on. And when I was reading this book called Theft of a Decade in preparation to do America's Lost Generation, and the numbers are not great. A lot of these programs will functionally collapse right about the time millennials go to use them, which ironically has been pretty much our economic story
Mhm.
um our whole lives. We do all the right things, we hit all of our marks, we accomplish all our goals, and right about the time we're going to collect the reward is no longer there. And that was the product of stay in school, don't do drugs, don't have sex, go to college. We went and you'll have a good middle class job. We did all of those things. We had less sex than our Gen X cousins. We did let fewer drugs, we went to college, most educated, much more stable, all this sort of thing. And the education leading to good middle class jobs things was really quite a farce. And a lot of people have lived very odd and asymmetrical lives trying to make up for that, especially in group B and group C. um And so it's a quite difficult thing. And we just don't have the spending power and lifestyles of our parents did.
No.
As people, are like, yeah, it's like I grew up, large house, jet skis, motorcycles, cars, all this type of thing. I know people that make great money that only own one car. I know people making great money that don't own a house. I have friends that they together clear over six figures a year. In any other time up until now, they would own their own home. They live in an apartment.
Mhm.
It's just this is how things have changed. And so people oftentimes criticize millennials for making certain decisions or going in a certain direction, not understanding money doesn't buy what it used to. My parents bought their house in 1993 for $106,000. They just sold that house for over $500,000.
Yeah.
And they never redid a kitchen or a bathroom the whole time we lived there. It looks basically the same as it did when we walked in the door in 1993. And so the reality is, to even saving for a down payment, they needed to come up with 10, 20 grand for a down payment. On the $500,000 house, it's 80 to $100,000.
Yeah.
It takes a and with living expenses being high, it takes so much longer to do that. That honestly, it's so bad in real estate now that the most common way they advise people to get a down payment is to call a parent or relative, because and a lot of people who own houses had family help, you
Mhm.
know, and that used to be something that was, kind of secret and shameful. Not anymore. It's a common thing, you
Yeah.
know.
I can hear that.
Um yeah, and so the book's about that. It gets into, everything through the lens of what happened in Japan 15 years before. It even gets into a little bit of the pandemic and how the pandemic changed things yet again, set people back yet again, which I felt personally with, again, releasing my big push for fiction right as the pandemic started. I was so happy I had a novel out, I had a major journal publishing, I had a short story collection come out the month of that journal publishing, and then lockdown and it all didn't mean anything. So it's been a really, it's been a very tough long haul. For me, I'm not yet 40 years old, and I've already lived through domestic terrorism, international transnational terrorism, two 20-year long wars of including friends who have PTSD from those wars, um, two major recessions, and a pandemic. I'm not 40. Whoever has to learn this history in high school is going to have a hard time memorizing all these dates. That's the reality, is you can be in your early 40s and we haven't got a break. The whole long way along. So that's what the book's about. It's coming out later this summer. I go through a lot of this stuff. We look to Japan as a guide. We kind of look to the future. I did laugh. One of the person who proofread it complained at the end. She's like, this book is very depressing and you don't offer any solutions." I said, well, the solution is a complete restructuring of the American economy. Not transferring money from the young to the old. That's it. That's the only solution. Everything else, there's nothing to be done for it. We're just out here living this way now. And so yeah. And her jaw was open. She's like, but can't we do anything? Not really. The time to do something was 30 years ago. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Of course, that Social Security is not an entitlement, right?
Well, we call it that, and it's not a very good way to call it, because the reality is, both you and your employer pay taxes. You pay out of your paycheck. The employer pays the other half. It goes to security. Here's the great thing about Social Security, and why, of all the entitlement programs, it's the easiest one to save, is because it's self-funding. It has its own tax structure that goes into it. All we really needed to do is to stop Newt Gingrich in 1995 from taking money out of it. We would be fine
Bingo.
today. That was really all we needed to do. Which ironically, my mother complained about at the time. I was only 7, so I didn't really know what she was talking about. But as I started studying this in college and later, I called her and I left, and she's like, oh yeah, no, the minute they do that, I knew it was, it was not, that was not going to be good long term. And so, yeah, we're facing down Social Security running out of money in 2035, not because anyone did anything wrong other than Congress decided to use it as a free slush fund because in the 90s, the boomers were in their prime age of working and there was a surplus in Social Security. Not understanding, no, we need that money later. Like we're gonna need that, give it 30 years and we're gonna need that money later. And so Social Security is probably the easiest one to save because it has its own tax structure. You can raise the cap on incomes that pay into Social Security. You could even raise Social Security taxes. Social Security probably can be restructured and saved. Realistically, like you
Yeah.
can probably save Social Security. When we start talking about Medicare, Medicaid, the situation becomes a lot more difficult because that money comes from the general fund from Congress. It is a mandatory appropriation sort of thing, but there is no underlying tax that supports those programs. That's why I say, really, to Bernie Sanders' point, all of that needs to be rolled into a universal healthcare program that we pay a tax of out of our paychecks, because then it would be a self-funding program like Social Security, and that it would actually save you money. People already
Yeah.
pay for healthcare out of their paychecks in premiums. They have out-of-pocket expenses and deductibles. We're already paying this money.
Yeah.
Rather than paying it to insurance companies for their profit margins of shareholders, we could put it into a big giant pot, which I like to call Patriot Care, because it would get more Republicans to vote for it, Patriot Care. And if we put all that money together, we would end up with a much better health system.
That
We
is what.
spend per capita more than any other developed country for no universal health care and worse outcomes. We
Mm,
could spend half as much and get twice as more by getting the insurance companies out of the business of it and just hire them to administer our new Patriot Care program.
yeah, I
So
kind of like that
it's
idea. Uh,
And you can even have, an
mm,
income-based fee structure for certain services like doctor's visits and pharmaceuticals, which many state Medicaid programs have. When I was young and very poor, I was on Medicaid in Colorado, and
yeah,
different prescriptions had a different fee structure between like $1 and $5. So
yeah.
I actually, on the Cameron Journal, have a post called My Plan for Universal Healthcare, and it involves an income-based fee structure for doctor's visits and pharmaceuticals that would raise about a quarter of the revenue you need to make it work.
Mm,
So there's competent ways to pay for it. I sometimes get very frustrated with my colleagues on the progressive left because they're not talking about the practical ideas of, okay, you want to do this? How much money is available? How are we actually going to pay for it? All this type of thing. And I think it's a mistake to not be very honest with people, to be like, look, you're paying this much per year. If you pay half of that to the government, you get everything you have now and you're actually money ahead. Will actually save money by doing it. And I think the reality for we millennials is we're going to have that conversation very importantly over the next decade because Medicare and Medicaid are getting too expensive to pay for. The three biggest line items in the federal government are in this order: defense, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Now, Social Security doesn't count because it's self-funding and has its own tax. So that we'll take that one away. So we're left with defense and healthcare. Getting and nobody really wants to reduce defense spending when China's on the rise. We have a war with Ukraine and Russia. We have Israel, Palestine. So really, it's got to come out of healthcare. And the reality is, we've got to reduce expenses there and reform those programs in the 2030s. Right now, we get to still kind of play around with these ideas, and the Trump administration is trying to do something. In the 2030s, about the time millennials really start to take political power in this country,
yeah.
we won't have a choice. We're going to have to fix these programs because we just simply won't be able to
Oh,
afford them.
how does your plan universal health? How does it figure? How does it prevent what's happening in Canada and England on this? Because I got a friend in Canada that's
Yeah,
sick and is fighting her system, and it's
yeah.
sickening what she's going through to get.
No, I'm very familiar with Canada's system. I have a business partner in Canada. I'm
Yeah.
very familiar with the NHS in Britain because I have dear friends in Britain.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot of the difficulties, we'll talk about Canada first. Canada's system is a bit difficult because it is very small. Canada's a very large country and it's very rural. So here's kind of one of the fun things about Canada. They have only about 40 million people. Their country's bigger than ours, but with a quarter of the population. We have 330 million, they have 40 million. And most of the country lives literally in Toronto and Montreal. Like that's where most of the country lives, sort of thing. So if you live in these areas, you have fewer wait lists because there's more services. When you get farther out into more rural areas like Newfoundland, Prince Edward Island, the Maritimes, or on the West Coast in Alberta, Saskatchewan, services get very limited. Their new policy about recommending assisted suicide to people that I don't think necessarily need to die, I think is a policy decision purely out of finances and saving money. We could just choose not to do that. I think in Canada they're choosing to do it because there is an agenda by certain people in the healthcare administration to make that available and encourage people to do it because they do not want to actually solve the underlying issues that these people have. Canada, interestingly enough, does not have as robust of a private healthcare network. Contrast that, which is why your friend is struggling. Contrast that with the UK, that actually has parallel systems. There's the NHS public system for those that can't afford to pay for private care. So basically, the rich self-select out. They still have to pay the tax, but they self-select and have private clinics and hospitals in the
Yeah.
UK. And then everyone else who can't afford that, does the NHS. And so I think in our country, we would probably end up with some similar system where we have a small private system kind of for the wealthy, and everyone else is on Cameron's new Patriot Care plan. And so I think it's a matter of policy decisions. I don't think in this country you'd get very far with a doctor-assisted suicide thing or anything like that, because that's just not, I don't think we would necessarily pursue that as a policy. But I also think when it comes to wait times, wait lists, times for operations, which is a problem in the UK, in Canada, in Australia. Years ago, I lost a very dear friend who was waiting for an operation and died waiting for the operation. Solving wait lists and wait times is really some things that plague our healthcare system now. Making sure that you're recruiting lots of doctors and nurses, making sure that they're paid and compensated well, making sure their mental health is kept well, making sure that we have clinics and hospitals, in lots of parts of the community. I had this conversation with my mom, who's almost 70, and they closed the small hospital near where they used to live. And uh and I said, and she's like, "Oh, are they close to the Anthony North?" And I'm really sad about that because now it would be so long to get to a hospital. And I said, "Here's the thing, Mom, you've been opposing universal health care. If we had a universal system, they couldn't just close your hospital. We could call your state house rep in Denver and complain. We could talk to the county and complain. We could use democracy to keep your hospital open so you would feel more comfortable about not having to drive all the way into the city to get to a decent hospital." It changes the dynamics of how we do and administer healthcare. It changes the costs, all this sort of thing. So I think we have to look to the world, learn the best policies and practices, and begin, as Kamala Harris suggested, a 10-year implementation program, a transition over a decade into a new universal system.
Oh, I didn't hear that about her wanting a 10-year transition form.
So back in 2020, when she was first running for president, she was out and out supporting of universal health care. One of the compromises that she made, because unions oftentimes take lower wages to get more healthcare funding, the unions wanted to give their contracts time to run out before the universal healthcare came in to take over that system. So, and I think quite brilliantly, she said, "Great. Let's bring it in over a decade." Canada did this in the 80s, actually. They did basically a 10-year transition period where they slowly but surely reduced a private health insurance system and moved to a universal system. That and they and it gives union contracts time to run out. It gives businesses time to plan, all this sort of thing. And there's also other ways to do it. Britain went with a "we're going to make healthcare workers government employees" model. Um, Denmark does not. They have a government-funded insurance model, and it's essentially government-funded private market. That's where Obamacare got that idea
Yeah.
in 2009, 2010. We could also implement something similar by expanding Medicaid a lot more, by expanding Medicare. That's why Bernie Sanders has asked for, Medicare for all sort of thing. Well, we could do a similar system where you pick your health insurance company, which would basically be your health delivery model sort of thing. Um, and go from there. The rest of the world has had decades to figure this out. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can go to the rest of the world and pick the best of the best,
Mhm.
and then begin an implementation progress over some years.
Oh, I see. So that sound don't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's something. Here's the funny part I always find about these discussions. This is why I hate the messaging of the Democratic Party. When I sit down and have these conversations and I walk people through it, people have the moment you just had, where they're
Yeah,
kind of like, oh, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. I can see how that would work. No one in charge at the DNC ever is having these conversations. Like, no one's sitting down with people and be kind of like, okay, here's what it would look like. Here's how we actually accomplish this. That conversation is never being had. It just becomes this amorphous thing of universal health care, Medicare for all, that you just have to quote unquote believe in without understanding here's how things would change, or here's the possibilities of things we could do, or here's how we solve waitlist issues, which is really just a matter of bed space and people, you know, all of these things. No one's actively having that conversation to understand how we actually accomplish this.
yeah,
But I think over the next 10 to 20 years, we're not going to have an option anymore.
yeah.
We're going to have to address it. We're
I'm
going to
70.
have to do something about it
Yeah,
actively.
I lived through a lot of that because I'm 75.
Right.
So, all of that. However, I didn't do a very good job of raising myself because I raised myself. I left home at 14
Yeah.
and raised myself from then on,
I
and
mean,
do a very good
that's a
job.
lot. Well, you're still here, so you did something right.
Yeah, and I did. I'm living in an assisted living facility now,
I
which
mean,
is
that's
in Lakewood, Colorado.
yeah.
I don't know if you know where that
Yes.
is.
I grew up in the Denver area, so I know it very well. I
Yeah.
used to work at the Target at Colorado Mills Mall
Oh,
on
okay.
Denver West Parkway.
Yeah,
So
which
I,
is
I went
gone.
to high school at Beth Eden at 26th and Wadsworth, so I know Lakewood very well.
Yes, you do, because I'm at 31st and Wadsworth South.
I know exactly where you're at. Yes. Yeah. I know exactly where you're at.
Yeah, got a Village Inn right across the street, which makes it good.
I have had many a breakfast in that village. I know exactly where you're at. I
Uh,
could drive to you right now and shake your hand if I were in Denver.
where are you?
I'm currently in Hartford, Connecticut.
Connecticut. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I lived in Seattle for 10 years. I left in 2014. I lived in Seattle for 10 years. I briefly tried the DC area and that did not work out.
No.
But was in Seattle for 10 years. And then about a year and a half ago, I wanted to give the East Coast another try. I'd always dreamed about being in the New York area. And so I moved to Wilmington, Delaware. I actually lived about 5 minutes from where Joe Biden was lived as a child. Um, and was born. And then my apartment that I was living in that was very lovely had a major mold issue, and I was actually getting very sick.
Mm.
And I'd already had COVID twice. I'd had long COVID, and I was just getting worse and worse and worse. And so, when they were kind of like, we need to really gut this whole apartment. At first it was the, oh, we'll remodel, we'll clean, and then it became the, oh, we need to gut it. Oh, you should, partially move out, sort of thing. And then it kind of drug on, and we
Mm.
eventually parted ways. And so, I'm very lucky. A buddy of mine owns a house up here, and so I came up here just kind of as a refuge. I didn't know where to go, really. So I just
Mm.
came up here initially, sort of a refuge. Um, and then I ended up staying much longer than I intended, but happily so. But it's good. I have great internet here, and the studio is really lovely here, and so it's been a lot of fun. And I'm still in the region I need to be in for
Yeah.
what I do, so
Yeah.
it's been a lot of fun. I was in Denver 2 years ago in 20 when I was moving from Seattle to Delaware. I stopped in 2023, and
Yeah.
yeah, I have a dear friend that lives right in downtown at 17th and Franklin, and so it's yeah, we've had a lot of fun. So I haven't been there in a while, but I've been there recently.
Yeah.
One of our authors is in Denver, Dr. James Augsbury. He's a retired neurosurgeon and he lives there
Oh,
as well.
okay.
So I have lots of reasons to come back there.
Yeah, you do.
So but
Well,
yeah, it's an interesting I kind of miss it. I don't miss the altitude, I don't miss the weird weather. But I definitely do I miss the mountains a lot. I miss the lovely views on a clear day. I do miss that a lot, things
yeah.
like that. So,
Well, I
but
spent
yeah.
13, I left here in 2006, and had to go to
Yeah.
California for my health.
Hmm.
I ended up spending 13 years there, and I'm so unhappy with it. I had to come back to Colorado and got into the same place as Denver. San Francisco is in Denver now.
Yeah.
It's really bad down. It's just nasty.
I mean, California one of the most beautiful, most amazing pieces of land on the planet. It unfortunately is run by idiots.
Hmm.
And one of the reasons I cannot live in California is because I would be in Sacramento every day knocking on doors asking why they're so dumb. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, you have one of the most blessed pieces of land on the planet. Why are you running it like a bunch of idiots? Like, and I'm a Democrat. I just be on the every day, you're still being dumb. Like Wednesday, clack, 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 you're still being dumb. Like I would be homeless because that's what I would occupy my time doing. So I
Yeah.
can't live in California.
No,
But
I can't
no, I mean
either.
no. Yeah, no, I mean Denver has changed a lot. I mean, I have
Yeah.
not lived there in 11 years, and
Mhm.
every time I go back, it has always changed so much. Um, I think also one of the problems with Denver is don't let this guy. I always tell people, do not let the skyscrapers fool you. Denver is not a big city. It's really an oversized town, and it
Right.
likes to act like an oversized town. And I think part of the problem is Denver's become a big city. Like well, you've got and the problems that come with being a big city, drugs, homelessness, all this type of thing.
Yep.
And I think the part of the problem is there's still kind of a latent resistance um of people who don't really want to deal with those issues and address them head on
Hmm.
because people live there to not have to deal with any of those things. And so I think that makes it um difficult to get a lot of movement on any of this stuff because nobody really wants to deal with this shit, and that makes it hard when you
Yeah.
get people with that attitude. That makes it very hard to be able to solve anything or actually move the needle on any of these issues because no one really wants to address any of it,
No,
you
they don't
know.
want to talk about it. They just want to keep going the way they were going. I know. I noticed that when
Yeah.
I came back in 2019, when I came back to
Yeah.
Colorado, and I was born and raised in a small town up in the mountains here called Creed, and
Oh yeah.
that's where I want to be. Can't go up there.
Yeah.
I can't live up there.
Right, yeah. I I have asthma issues, and one of the reasons I don't live in Colorado anymore is I can't really do that altitude. I can
No.
come visit briefly,
Yeah.
couple days, then I gotta go.
Yeah.
Sort of. That's why I live on the East Coast, or why I lived on the West Coast. I stay on coasts now. I'm a
Yeah.
coastal Cameron. Um,
Really.
where it's low altitude and oxygen molecules are close together. And so yeah, I mean it's no, I mean people are very resistant to actually dealing with and solving the issues and problems, and that makes it hard. Whereas in big cities here on the East Coast or even on the West Coast, it's people we don't necessarily do everything we could do, but people aren't resistant to new solutions in the same way that Denver is.
Yeah. Well,
So
I've noticed that since I've been back. It's worse than it was when I left.
yes,
Yes, I've noticed
yes,
that quite a bit. I stay pretty much
yeah.
close to home because it's just not my way of living anymore out there. I,
Yeah, it was really cool. So I went to high school at Beth Eden Christian School, as I mentioned.
yeah.
Um, and then I um and then I went to college in Greeley
Yeah.
and I went to college there for 2.5 years, and I went to grad school remotely to another institution, but I lived in Greeley because I wanted to stay with my friends, and I had a
Mhm.
girlfriend at the time. So I stayed there for 4.5 years, and then I moved back down to Denver, and I did nightlife and all this type of thing. And it was a very different time and environment. We helped make the city cool. We brought in a lot of new people, new energies. When I was there, there was no literature. There's now a writing convention and writing group, and people doing literature and engaging with words that did not exist when I was there.
Yeah.
Um, you now have, one of the, I'm very proud to say, my original fashion event that I created, Denver Fashion Week, is now one of the biggest fashion events in the country,
Yep.
which is really cool. It's now run by 303 Magazine, and we love them over there. And all these things that just didn't exist for me when I was, there, and I'm proud to say I helped create some of that, which was really cool. Um, but every time I go back, I'm always shocked by new things have gone up, more has been built, and the vibe is very different. There's a lot of people from a lot of other, places now, and they've sometimes, brought different attitudes and ideas with them that don't really align with the Denver we all used to know and love.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and also I just think Denver it is now becoming, they call it the third coast. It's really become a real center point of things, and it's starting to, crawl its way up into the major American cities.
Mhm.
I just don't know that it's ready for prime time.
It's
I just
not.
don't feel like, yeah,
It's
that people are
so
just ready
not.
to be a big city. Yeah, it's just
It's so
not.
not ready.
No.
A lot of work that has to be done, and we're not doing it because we're not. One of it is now. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I belong to the the Constitution Party.
I worked for them once.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I don't like the Republicans any more than I like the Democrats for the
There are plenty
same
of reasons to not like either of them.
for the same reasons. So I do have problems there because we're run by liberals, progressive,
Yes.
and that was the trouble in California. That's Gavin Newsom, who's out of office here pretty soon. Thank God.
Yeah. No, I mean I mean there's, there's a lot of, I think part of the problem is there is, um at least in California, there's certain sort of attitudes and things that are a given that just holds the state back from growth. Like
Yes.
in California, CEQA been a complete developmental disaster. You
Mm,
know, Prop 13, the way they do property taxes, is really great if you bought a house in about 1971. It's
yeah.
a complete disaster if you're trying to buy one in 2025. Sort of thing. And it's, I mean, when you're selling a bungalow that was built in 1948 for an aerospace worker that somehow in LA is now worth 1.5 million dollars, you just scratch your head and be kind of like, what have we done and gone wrong? And it's really sad because, in online spaces where I did my research for like America's Lost Generation, you'll talk to people and they'll be kind of like, yeah, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I can't afford housing. I really can't afford to live, even though I'm working, all this type of thing. And basically, there's the first question is, okay, where are you living? And they're like, oh, yeah, I'm in California. I'm like, honestly, you need to leave California. That's the best piece of advice I can give you. Things get cheaper when you get on the other side of the mountains. Even make it to the desert, prices go down. Get to Nevada, prices go down even more. Make it to New Mexico, you're living well. Arizona, you're gonna love Tucson. Like, I mean, really the best piece of advice I can give people, get the hell out of California
Yep.
because the way
Stay
things
away from
are, the
Denver.
way things are structured, the way the costs are, just doesn't make any sense. For me, what's so scary, my art mentor, Jesse Jacobs, who created the San Jose Museum of Modern Art in San Jose, she always told me, she said, Cameron, so goes California, so goes the country.
Right.
And we were having this conversation about 2009, and I'm kind of like, Jess, that's not great. Like, that's not good. Like, and
It's
he's like,
true.
no, he doesn't. That's how it is. Whatever's happening there, however, that's how the rest of the country will be. And I'm kind of like, that will kill people. Like, no, most people won't survive Californication. I mean, it's just
No.
not going to work.
Right.
Um, and when you start talking about, energy needs and green energy stuff and all this sort of thing, that's just not going to work. It's not,
No.
it's just not, no, people are not going to want to live that way.
No.
And that was 15 years ago, sort of thing,
Yeah.
almost 20 years ago. Now it's all of those problems have gotten a lot worse.
Yeah.
And it has spread. Housing everywhere is too expensive. The price of cost
Denver's
of living is
incredible.
too expensive everywhere. And the reality is if you are in the top 10% of earners, you're not really noticing it. But if you're everybody else or
Mm.
a senior on fixed income or whatever have you, disaster.
Well, you would be shocked if you knew how much I paid for it. And I have a studio apartment. I've got a screen behind me to keep it, to cut out the rest of the apartment because it's
Right.
just one single apartment. It's just a studio apartment. It's what it is.
Yeah. No,
And,
I'm not surprised at all. My grandfather was at a facility in Sterling, Colorado, and
yeah,
my mom was managing that, and it was the expense was absolutely
it's
unreal.
incredible.
So no, I would not be at all surprised at all. Absolutely. I mean, it makes it extremely hard, extremely difficult. And the here's the unfortunate reality is for older people, if the state won't cover it all and you
No,
don't have family who can help,
no.
you end up homeless.
Yeah,
And
I've
if
had
you're
it.
not in great health, you can't last very long out there. Death. So the reality is these things all have consequences, and these policies do kill people. And
Yes,
that's something I try to remind myself of all the time, and I try to remind the readership at the Cameron Journal, whether I'm doing the News Hour, which will air this evening at 7 o'clock. Or in the weekly newsletter on Saturday or whatever have you.
yeah.
Always remind people this stuff has consequences and people will die.
Hmm. And you're absolutely correct. And like you said, leave California, but avoid Denver. Actually, avoid Colorado,
Yes.
period. Stay in New
When
Mexico.
when I was looking to leave Seattle because Seattle had gotten too expensive and there had been some new taxes brought in that were not practical for me as a self-employed person. I was looking at where else to go, and I was really sad because I wanted to stay in Washington on the West Coast forever. But I was kind of looking where else to go, and I started looking at prices and of just apartments and things in Denver, and I'm kind of like, it's more expensive than here.
Yeah.
I'd save money by staying in Seattle, even with the taxes and everything. So it's I ended up not doing that. I ended up coming to the East Coast. And so. Yeah, I mean it is a very difficult thing, and that's where, building a lot more, having a lot, a wider variety of real estate and having it be much cheaper helps everyone. And and also allowing people to have ADUs to keep elderly relatives in their homes, or being able to quickly move parents into their kids homes in an accessory dwelling unit situation.
Yeah.
There are different ways to solve this. Unfortunately, a lot of it's locked up in a web of local regulations that are just a disaster. And deep reform there is needed to just make housing available. And right now, the housing system works really great for those that own multiple properties, rent them out, or want to make money off selling them. It works great for that. It does not work well for housing people.
Putting people
That,
in buildings.
yes. I mean, the reality is people need to be in buildings, tangible structures. And
Right.
unfortunately, the current real estate system advantages the people who own those and can make money off of them rather than the humans that need to live in them.
Right.
And
That's
that's
everywhere.
yes,
That's
and that's
everywhere.
the fundamentally, broken part of the housing crisis. And it affects everyone young and old. It's why your studio apartment is too expensive. It's why half my friends can't buy houses. This system is only working for the top 10%
Right.
at most. Everyone else is disadvantaged.
Right.
Even now, millennials have a 52% home ownership rate, which is 20% lower than their parents, by the way. But even though now we're over half, there's still 48% of us that don't own a house, and most of us probably can't afford it.
Right.
And that is, and then when you talk about social mobility, economic mobility, building assets over time, all this type of thing, that's a complete disaster. But fundamentally, it leaves a lot of people in a very precarious situation. And economically speaking, when people are spending $4,000 on a mortgage, which is not uncommon in some places now, that's a lot of money going into the pockets of banks that's not going into the greater economy. You want to
Right.
know why Main Street's not surviving? You want to know why stores are closing? You want to know why malls aren't making it? Because all the money is going into ever fewer hands. And
Right.
so you just end up with this funneling of wealth to the top that has become so pernicious.
Well, we're about out of time.
I know we are. I've gone on for too long.
No, you've done excellent. I'm really, really happy to have had you, Cameron.
Yeah,
What would
thanks.
be the one thing you would want to say to my listeners?
I would say, if there's one thing right now that I think is so important, um, we are in a very precarious time in American history. Um, Stay vigilant, be prepared, and stand up for yourself.
Excellent. Hey, don't go away. I'm going to stop the recording, but don't go away.
Thank you for listening to the show. There are show notes and a place to comment at https:// coffee time again.libsyn.com/website. He hopes that you liked what you heard and will tell others about him. Dale is attempting to get a following that both disagrees and agrees with him. He does not want yes men. If you disagree, wonderful. He is happy to have you here as a part of the Coffee Time Again team. Dale does not talk about the news of the day. He is attempting to give a history lesson that is just as important about what is going on in the headlines of today. Please do not hesitate to contact him. Just remember that Dale wants a clean show, meaning no cussing, name calling, yelling, or hate allowed. You can disagree with him and not be disagreeable about it. Support him and help keep this alive. https colon // glow.fm / coffee time again.